Good evening. Welcome to the May 8th, 2023 Education Committee and Supplementary Regular Board Meeting of the Lower Merion Board of School Directors. The board believes it's in its best interest and the best interest of the students of the district to hear comments from district residents. An opportunity will be given later in the meeting for public comment, both in person and through the chat feature, which will be read by Ms. Buckman. This meeting is being live streamed and video recorded with sound for public broadcast. All participants joining via the webinar will need to use the chat feature, which will be enabled during audience recognition. So thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm going to ask Ms. Schaefer to start off our meeting.
Good evening, everyone. Before I introduce the presentations that are scheduled for this evening, I wanted to make note of what may, again, be on people's minds, parents' minds, community members' minds, my mind, relative to some communications that we issued today regarding an incident at Black Rock Middle School. The situation, for those that may not be aware, we had a parent notify our building team this morning about some disturbing messages that were shared on Discord earlier this year. We immediately involved the police in our investigation, and as I've shared in the past, we have a rigorous protocol that we do internally, as well as the investigation that's ongoing by the police. The student involved is not attending school at this time and will not be returning to school prior to a completion of our investigatory process, as well as the other measures that we will be putting in place moving forward. I will note that the persons posted include named individuals and groups that the poster wanted to see harmed. The groups included people belonging to a particular racial group, people who had particular disabilities or conditions, and people who had particular sexual preferences. I share this because, again, I call it out as a concern that I hope we share as a community, and an effort that we need to tackle together, so that we're identifying needs of students, we're educating students, we're ensuring that the devices that they have at home and in schools are used with and meet the expectations of behavior and conduct. And when they don't, one of the things that I think is empowering in this moment is that someone reported this to us so we could take the next steps to address it. And I think that's what I've shared with staff. What I'll share with you is that through all of this, the thing that keeps me motivated and going and optimistic that we can do this and do it better together is that we have to have confidence in safety measures. And the way that you have confidence in our measures is that we continue to communicate to you what they are. In not every case are we going to be able to communicate all the facts that we have available to us, but what we want to continue to impress upon you is that our commitment is to ensure, first and foremost, the safety of all of the students and staff in our buildings every day. I don't think any staff member here goes to bed without, thinking, especially our administrators, every day, what are the security and safety measures that we need to make sure are in place and are functioning every day for our students. These are the things that are on our mind constantly, and with your help, we can do this better together. And like I said, the takeaway, while this is all very concerning and worrisome, I have children, middle school and high school children. I worry about this for them too. So know that it's coming from a place of also being a mom in your position as well. And everyone plays a role in this. If you see or hear something of concern, please bring it forward. Even if it's just a gut feeling, we can help investigate it. But if it's an emergency, if there's an immediate threat that's being made, and it's not, it's something that should be referred to the police, so that we can, together with the police, support the students and families involved. But they have a different scope than we do, and we want to continue to let you know that we will work in partnership with Lower Merion Police Department to, again, ensure the safety and security of our students and staff in these cases. So I, understand that this is a worrisome time, and know that we continue to be committed to addressing this for the benefit of our current students, but also how do we move forward that's in best service of our students and families here in Lower Merion School District.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. And I just do think that it's important to sort of reemphasize some of what you said in terms of we are a community, and this is something that we need to work together with. And we welcome and value your comments and concerns and suggestions, but also remember that we are just the school district is a piece of our community, and that we need to be considering this in a broader perspective as well.
All right, so moving on, 2 presentations this evening. The first one I will be giving on an update to the Healthy Start times, the requested modifications by the board, and then we will turn to the findings from the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Study, and that will be presented following this presentation. Between my glasses and no glasses. All right, good evening. This is, again, an update to the ongoing work that we have as a district been engaged in for several years, and most recently connected to the decision to change our start times for our students in beginning in 2024, and I'll talk through that a little bit. But I did want to give a little bit of background to those that may be new to this conversation, but also to emphasize the why. Why did we engage in this effort to ensure better sleep opportunities for our adolescent students? The research is pretty clear on this one, and certainly some of the leading groups such as the American Academy of Pediatrics, American Medical Association, and the CDC that together recommend that middle and high school start times begin no earlier than 8:30. So what we're doing is trying to follow the science here so that we can provide opportunities for students adolescent students to maximize their sleep, because what the science also says is that there's a recommended amount of sleep, 8 to 10 hours per night, and that because of the circadian rhythms of our adolescents, that it's harder for them to fall asleep and therefore struggle to get 8 to 10 hours of sleep if our start times are, continue as they are in those earlier hours. So the why behind this is pretty important to us. I would also add that it's, as we're looking at student health, more student wellness holistically here in the district, it's one piece of the puzzle. So we hope that this will be a part of a healthier lifestyle for students moving forward. Again, just for reference, there's some meetings from, technically June 2022 was the 21-22 school year, but a list of meetings that if you'd like to refer to the discussion and dialogue that's happened over the course of this past year. Board Docs has, for your reference, those earlier presentations which led us to where we are currently. Currently, though, this is our schedule, helpful to orient those new to this process, to the schedule. Currently, our high school starts first, with middle and elementary school following. High school begins at 7:30. You can see the total time in that final column for each level. And importantly, one of the things that we have to maintain here in the district is 3 tiers, so that our transportation system is able to deliver students to school and to home at the times that are identified here. The school schedules that have been authorized subject to possible modifications that are going to be described in this presentation are to a reordering. This was also referred to as a secondary swap. This entails middle school beginning first at 8 a.m., high school second tier at 8:40 a.m., and elementary and the final tier as they are now at 9:20 a.m. You can see that there's some adjustments to the end time as well as the total time of the day, which allowed us to present this schedule here. And there was a discussion around some adjustments that potentially could be made looking at this schedule. Though the charge for the administration was, at least in this exercise, was to maintain this order. So middle school, high school, elementary school. The requested modifications are identified here, and I'm going to take it to this one, which the first and third bullet are what I have couched as time adjustments. And so these requested modifications from the Board of School Directors was based upon the community feedback process and a desire to look at some additional adjustments, including ending the elementary day 15 minutes earlier than the proposed end time of 4:05, and possibly considering a slightly earlier middle school start if necessary to ensure that no school ends after 4 p.m. So in looking at that particular request, we looked at several variables, and I'm going to walk through each one of them because to some degree this is a math equation and then an implementation question. So when we look at the different alternates here, and starting at the first one was simply to look at a shift, taking each tier and moving it 15 minutes earlier, thereby achieving the 15 minutes earlier at the end of the elementary day. And so there's no change to the length of the school day. It was merely a shift back. Some feedback that we received around this particular adjustment, and the feedback was through our administrative team and having conversations at the building level with staff to get their input on these particular adjustments and the impact it would have on the school day from their perspective. So again, some of the feedback was, well, this pushes middle school earlier into that 7:45 time, which is a concern that was raised, we know, in the community and also by our staff. So that was a noticing with this particular structured adjustment. Also, you still see in the elementary day that additional instructional time, but it compromises the time for staff to be together and to collaborate, which is true of the proposed time as well. So that remains an ongoing concern from a staff perspective. The one a couple positives from this adjustment, again from the feedback, is that there's no change to the time of the middle school day. And the high school adjustment was a little more desirable because I think the day ended a little bit earlier. And also we maintained that loss of 20 minutes in this particular scenario. So this was deemed a little more desirable from a high school standpoint. So I was trying to highlight as we go through what the feedback looked like. The second alternate was just taking the start time and end time, but playing more so with the length of the day. How does that affect, achieve that idea of ending 15 minutes earlier for elementary school? And what came through with the feedback that we've received so far is the concern about the amount of time that's being reduced from the instructional program across the day. And while we have looked at some schedules that make that work, I would say that the biggest reservation from the lens of sort of the instructional practice piece is that 35 minutes, while you can take 2 to 3 minutes out of subject areas, the cumulative impact of that over the course of the year can be days of instruction for a particular course. And so without the planning time that we would ideally have involved with being able to accommodate a 35-minute shift, it feels, I think the concern with that is that we're potentially impacting instructional programming because of that reduction. And I make the comparison to the work that we did on the middle school and elementary schedule, and the time and investment that was involved in designing that over the course of the year was about sort of putting first what do we need to do, and then putting the time parameters around that. So this is working a little bit backwards, but it is a doable option from the standpoint of can we do the math and reduce time. That's an option, but again, not a preferred one based on the feedback we've received. It also keeps that elementary day start time a little bit later, that 9:20 a.m., which we saw it shift a little bit in that last scenario. Sorry, I won't jump ahead. And so those were the main points of feedback with this particular modification. The third modification, which I already have the areas circled, is a combination of a shift and a reduction. So primarily what you'll see is in terms of the shift, the middle school starting at 7:55 a.m. That allows elementary school to start at 9:15 a.m. It also meets that objective of ending earlier than 4:05 by 15 minutes. So you see a 3:50 end time. And you also see it in this scenario, all of the schools have the same length of day. So it's a 6 hours and 35-minute day. Again, the concerns that were expressed here were expressed already around that reduction of instructional time at both the middle and high school levels. So putting this back into that chart, I tried to highlight so you could see a comparison of where the areas were noted of concern. Again, this is a check-in, this is an update for you in terms of the work that we've done to date around trying to make these modifications on the timing and some of the feedback we've received so far. So while it certainly is possible, obviously there are impacts elsewhere. And I'm going to also talk later a little bit in this presentation about some other places where we may be able to find some time in that transportation corridor, but we're not quite there yet, so I would leave that for a future slide. But I wanted to move on to the other modifications and give you those updates as well. An important piece that the board articulated, and so did the community, is opportunities for providing before school child care supports for elementary students and their families. We have Right at School is our in-house child care provider. They work directly with parents and guardians about setting up before and after care child care arrangements, but they are hosted, they host those child care arrangements within our schools. And we have approached them with ideas about how could they potentially tier their options for families rather than having to pay a full amount for maybe time that families don't use. Is there a way to maybe offer an hour start? So much like we think about is, their ability to staff that and being able to manage that on top of whatever their full-time program looks like in terms of enrollment. They're still looking at that and promised us some pricing options, but the questions we still have are is this a family contribution? Is the district paying a contribution towards that amount? So that would be one option. Another option would be for them to shift some staff to us that we would pay, and that they would serve as more or less a morning monitor. They did help support us during COVID with helping to provide some additional supervision with their staff and the distancing protocols that we had in place. So we had good experience with that as well. So that would potentially be an option as well if we needed to support some type of before care and what that cost might look like. And that's, again, for right at school staff serving in that capacity. We've also looked internally, potentially with cafeteria recess aides or stipend existing staff to provide that supervision. Again, it would, we need to build into that, because it would be, in terms of a safety and security measure, making sure that we have enrollment protocols, that we have attendance protocols, that we have. It couldn't just necessarily be a drop-off scenario for our staff, because we would want to make sure that we're providing the supervision that we're guaranteeing that we would provide in that capacity, and so there would need to be some parameters around that. And again, the question of the costs associated with that, is that a district cost or is that a shared cost with families? But we see that I think the good news is that there are some options for us to explore, and we will continue to explore that. And one of the caveats, I should say, we were operating more so under the assumption that this would be a schedule that would involve more than like a 5-minute shift. So if our currently 9 o'clock start time, if that was, we're looking at something that's shifting to like 9:20 that has more of an impact on families, and maybe not a scenario where it was only 5 minutes or so. So that the other caveat I would put with this is the cost piece as it relates to the implementation of full-day kindergarten coming in the same year, and what the impact of that is relative to the other costs that will be coming online at that same time. So we are working on building out those numbers, and ideally we will continue to share out as we get more information from our from right at school. The other important consideration was ensuring that our educators are supported during the transition, that all staff are supported during the transition to the new schedule with choice, agency, and voice in the planning and implementation. And this one in particular is meaningful for us, I think, administratively, to ensure that our staff are, to the extent possible, accommodated in the transition period, although this is a little bit different than the K-8 transition when we had many openings coming online and needs to fill. We want to make sure that we are able to identify early what potential hardships this may be for our staff. And one of the ways for us to assess that is what the final schedule looks like. Will probably make a difference in terms of early care, late care, how much of an impact is it for staff and their families. So our intention is, and we continue to work closely with the Lower Merion Education Association leadership on all of these items. We will, certainly some of what we've just talked about was reviewed at the building level with our staff to get that initial feedback. So our intent is to continue to solicit feedback from them as we move forward. A survey of staff based on those established schedules in the fall, seek to understand and accommodate where possible those changes in their core schedule. We also want to see in particular how that impacts their potential, I say EPER, but I realize that. So if they're a sponsor of an organization or a club sponsor, a coach, if the shift impacts their ability to fulfill that role, we also want to make sure we're accounting for that and being able to support those opportunities for students in 24 and 25 as well. And finally, if there are further adjustments, as I referred to, if we were going to, again, take the 35-minute approach, we would definitely want to make sure that more broad staff representation is involved in those conversations and how we make that 35-minute adjustment, if that's what it is, work in the best way for our students in their instructional experience. Some other refinements and commitments that I think are worth noting here this evening, and I mentioned previous to a minute ago, which is a potential look at our student transportation policy and administrative regulation early next year to see whether there are some ways in which we are currently providing transportation, and if we changed it slightly, may yield some additional time in those corridors that we're trying to maintain between levels, meaning right now we try to maintain 40 minutes. Is there a way to get 1 or 2 minutes there as opposed to taking 1 or 2 minutes off the instructional day and work in that direction? A shift to TransFinder. We've had a few board meetings discussing TransFinder, which is a school bus routing software that we're moving to, that we're hoping will potentially identify some additional efficiencies, which again, I don't think we're going to see a 30-minute reduction, but if we're able to gain a minute or two here or there, again, we would like to build that into the transportation gap as opposed to the instructional school day. And then also another year of hiring. We're hoping to see, continuing a stronger job market and hopefully more drivers interested in Lower Merion School District. Also, commitments moving forward is our, as I referenced earlier, the student wellness piece. Sleep is one aspect of that. We've are reimagining our student wellness policy. Our wellness committee is committed to ensuring that this is part of our work, and how do we frame this for students so they understand the benefits that we're intending to derive from this schedule change is our ongoing work. And importantly, I think, and maybe potentially different than what some other districts have been able to do yet, is really evaluate the impact of the change. Challenge Success, we partnered with Challenge Success probably initially 5 years ago or so, and part of that work was a student survey that talked about, that addressed issues of belonging, sleep, wellness, et cetera. And so we got some good data back then. We've had some more recent conversations about potentially doing a survey again next year, so we can see that pre-implementation data around sleep patterns, sleep habits, and then the following year to see, has that changed, has that moved the needle? And I think that's kind of exciting work because my sense is that some other local districts haven't had that opportunity because of COVID or disrupted school, and so I think it might give us a nice opportunity to get a nice data around that. So again, this ongoing work of how do we implement in a way that's meaningful and that we can come back and talk about what are the relative, what have we noticed, what's the good, bad, and ugly of this work, and but sticking to that initial commitment to increasing sleep time for students. And then part of that obviously is communicating early and often once we do finalize those schedules with whatever modifications we make, is constant reminders that this change will be happening in 2024 and the why behind it. Again, that kind of goes back to that wellness picture for our students and those steps that they can take now to start healthier sleep patterns, and hopefully looking forward to the change in 2024. So those are work, again, that's ongoing at this point. So any questions that you have?
Thank you very much, Ms. Schaefer. Before I open up for questions, I just wanted to remind everyone that our purpose here tonight was to provide an update that there is no vote expected to be taken tonight. We expect to do that at our June meeting. So I just wanted to preface the conversation around that so that whatever questions come up tonight or the conversation can help inform the administration as sort of we continue to refine this. So, Ms. Kalish?
Thank you. I had 2 questions. First, if we do the early care program, would that require us to then run extra busing runs for students that were doing early care to those, or would that not be part of the programmatic offering?
That was not part of our equation.
All right.
In terms of looking at a program that would run in the beginning of the day. It was not associated with a transportation commitment.
Okay. And then the other was if we were looking at that 35-minute reduction in instructional time, if that would affect anything having to do with the state minimum required time for students in school, or what our union negotiated contract for our educators, in terms of what we have already.
So we looked at this previously. I think we are still, would meet the minimum hour requirements for a school day. It's aligned with some other districts' timing that are out there already. And we did look into that. So I think we are capturing the required amount of time. As far as the negotiated agreement with the Education Association, the time that's reflected in there is the total length of the workday. So that adjustment, we would want to, I think, be mindful about what that time looks like. If the workday is 7 hours and 20 minutes, which it is, I should have led with that. That's the workday. And so if there's a reduction, how does that play out for expectations for our staff if they're not in front of students, if any?
I mean, and this is just me sort of thinking out loud, but we've heard from staff in recent months that they would like more planning time, and we're always trying to get lots of PD, professional development, for our staff, and if we have that extra flexible time, if we did make that shorter, that could at least have the benefit of offering extra planning time for our staff.
Dr. Sutton?
And I mean, it's right here, but I just want to say it out loud. So we're already reducing the high school day by 20 minutes. The two options below just added almost doubling.
Correct, so 15 additional minutes,
Got it,
yes.
okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure, because
Yep.
it's green, it looks like it's good, but we're already reducing. I just wanted to point that out.
Yes,
So if I look at alternative one, do you know now that 7:45 start time, what would be the earliest bus pickup? Would that be around 7:05 for middle schoolers?
I don't know for sure. I think under the old scenario, it was close to that time, so I would guess it might be even slightly earlier than that. Again, with the caveat that we're looking at some other transportation refinements, and we can come back and continue to look at that from the standpoint of what the earliest might be. I think we could make some estimates on that.
Got it. And then the same alternative one, and actually they're all the same, for the elementary school kids, probably the latest drop-off time would be 4:30. Is that about right? Because I feel like that's the math we did the last time.
4:57.
I think the latest, I think that's probably closer to the average, but the latest may be a little bit later than that. So I think we were closer to 5 o'clock, 4:55, so 15 minutes back would be roughly 4:40, I think.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. Thanks.
Ms. Garrison?
Thank you, Mrs. Schaefer. I was just curious about the modifications that might be necessary for people to have some support before the school. What's the name of the company that does the?
Right at school? Right at school?
Right at school. Would it be 3 aides needed per school?
It would depend
Potentially.
on the number of students enrolled. So it would be, that's why we would need to create registrations and so that we would make sure that the staffing would be appropriate. Some schools have more students in before care than others, so it would probably vary between 2 and 3.
Right. And so I'm assuming that once full day K is implemented, then we would need even more additional people.
Potentially.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have a quick follow-up to that question. So the cost estimate of the $67,000 to $84,000, is that for each school or across all of the schools?
It's for all of the schools.
Okay,
For
so-
right at school staff. That's, yep.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Sheriff?
For how many people? I mean, I'm sorry.
Remember, so it's just for an hour block.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the update and the work that you all are doing to explore our requested modifications. A few questions I have is currently, well, I understand on paper, the middle school starts at 8:15. What is shared with parents and families and students is for students to be at school at 8 o'clock. And so this modification would have a half an hour change to the technical time, but only 15 minutes to what is expected of students. My question is, would it be that 7:45 is the hard expectation for kids to be in there? I wouldn't want it to be, the question behind the question, I wouldn't want this 7:45 to be the like fake time and students are then expected to be there at 7:30, because then we're talking about a 45-minute shift, which is a different conversation.
So the arrival and attendance period currently at the middle school is 8 to 8:15. So this would reflect, the 7:45 a.m. would be like the 8:15 bell.
So it is.
So it would be,
So it'd be 7:30 to 7:45.
But the arrival and attendance period isn't a required time, like they're not required to be at school at 8.
so that's important, that is, okay. So-
8:15 is the official start time of middle school. I think what was created or conveyed this year in connection with the new schedule was this arrival and attendance period, so that students had a place to go beginning between 8 and 8:15. They are not marked tardy until 8:15. So similarly, we would structure something, that 7:45 would be the bell that created the situation, whether someone was on time or late.
So my follow-up question or request would be for administration to explore options at 7:45, if you're saying that you need that time there, to explore where else could attendance be taken in the schedule, that 7:45 is the time that the doors open. Like, I do not, my request would be to not have a 7:30 expectation of entry up until 7:45. And so what other options or ways could we look at the schedule to have that attendance period? I have some ideas if we want, but I'll save them for right now.
No, I think I can, we can look at that. I would also add, because it reminded me of just in terms of the shift in order means that middle school gets dropped off first. And I don't, with the middle period, sometimes what I heard from Mr. Vilsons is it depends on how efficient that first run is, and sometimes students get there earlier or later, and there may be more consistency in getting students to their designated location because they would be the first to arrive in the morning before the bus goes on to pick someone else up. I don't know that that has an impact. I don't think that impacts your question, but it just reminded me of another piece of this change that will be different for the organization.
And my second, is that on that?
Can I just add something into this? Is Mr. Vilson always mentions that they arrive 10 minutes before the start time. Is that built into this, or is that in addition?
No, so the routing that he does, where we gave you some estimates before, has that time built in simply because, and as he's explained, but I'll share it again, is that all buses can't arrive right at the time of the bell. There needs to be some tiering of it so that students can be dropped off and there's not as much wait time. So there is some natural tiering to that, and there has to be a schedule that's built so that students arrive before that final bell. So typically
I
it's around
guess
10
the
minutes.
difference, I would say, is in the elementary, the doors open at 8:40, but they're not sent up to classrooms until that first bell. In the middle school, they're sent to classrooms upon entry into the building, which creates a different expectation for students and families about what time school actually starts. So to your point, Mel, about arrival time, like how are we actually mapping those procedures and expectations so there's equity across the district, and actually what we're saying on paper as start time is a start time for families.
And certainly between now and the final presentation, I can make sure that the board's updated around specifically what those protocols would look like under a revised scenario. So to try to answer your question with more specificity.
Okay. And my second question whether it's here just for consideration, is just what information are we thinking of gathering this year around busing in particular to see where there might be some creativity and options around some of the other things Mr. Waldis, I'm sorry. Yes, presented, I'm a little tired, presented so that we can really use to this year as like a building year and getting information we might need that allows for more creativity.
And I mean, in terms of some of those strategies beyond just the adoption of a new routing system, which is a lot of changeover in the department, I think, through some of the policy work, that might help provide some direction to take a look at ways in which we might create more efficiencies in our routing moving forward, so.
So I'm going to follow up on that to share my concern, which I think is where you were sharing as well, around concern around, does 7:45 really mean 7:45, right? And whether that, and I think that's a really important piece that needs to be very clear in terms of any sort of movement on that. Ms. Schaffmeister, did you have another?
Sorry, one thing. I just think it is really important to, when we look at this again, to understand what the pickup time is and the drop-off time, because that is such a huge impact. Because when my kids walk out the door, it's when they're walking out the door at 6:25 and 6:35, not the time that school is right now. That's the impact that they have. So I think that needs to be really transparent when we talk about this again.
We can do that. I think, we focused on that scheduling piece, and so we can layer that additional information about that impact at home, which is certainly important.
Ms. Kalish?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to reiterate as we're having this conversation that part of the reason that the community was unhappy with the 2019 plan was that there was a tier of school that started at 7:45, and I think that it would be really not a great precedent for us to set if we then turned around and approved a schedule that started at 7:45. Obviously, we're all individuals and everybody's allowed to have their own opinion, but I would certainly not favor a start time of 7:45 for any group of kids, because they're kids, and as an adult, it's hard for me to be up and starting my day at 7:45, and for a 12-year-old, I don't know that would be any easier at all. It certainly wasn't for 12-year-old me, so.
Okay, well. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was a lot of information and a lot of food for thought for us as we move forward and share additional questions. Our next presentation.
If you can just give me a second. Emmy, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, that'd be great.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, yep, so tonight we have the culmination of our equity, diversity, and inclusion study through Education Northwest. Zooming in to join us today is Emmy Fujiata Conrads and Ashley Denton. So they should be up in a minute and ready to go, I think.
I'm sorry, Emmy, stop sharing. It's not going to let me bring you over. Here we go. All right, there you go.
Welcome, Ashley and Emmy.
Great. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me and see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. We'll go ahead and dive into it. So as Alexis mentioned, my name's Amy Fujita Conrads. I'm a researcher at Education Northwest, and I'm joined by my colleague Ashley Denton, who's a principal researcher here at Education Northwest. So I'm going to be presenting findings related to our Lower Merion School District Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Study. And I'm going to start with the purpose and overview of how the study came about, And then I'll dive into some of the findings from each stage of the evaluation along with corresponding recommendations. And at the end, we'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers as well. So this study emerged from a collaborative community process that began in late 2020 to early 2021. And through that process, Lmsb identified 3 critical focus areas that guided Education Northwest's equity study. And those 3 focus areas included curriculum, instruction, and pedagogy, professional learning, and staff diversity and hiring. And we at Education Northwest strove to continue this community collaboration throughout the equity audit. To do so, we established a 12-member advisory team of parents, educators, counselors, school board members, and community leaders. And we engaged this advisory team at regular intervals throughout the evaluation. So the advisory team provided feedback on the study plan, informed data collection instruments and methods, as well as helped to develop recommendations for the district. And in addition to the advisory team, we met bi-weekly with Lmsd district administration to guide the research. So our equity study questions were derived from the 3 critical focus areas identified earlier. So first, related to professional learning, we asked how have diversity, equity, and inclusion professional learning opportunities impacted teachers, staff, administrators, students, and families. For curriculum, instruction, and pedagogy, we asked to what extent is the district's curriculum diverse, equitable, and inclusive? And related to staff diversity and hiring, we asked what are the impacts of ongoing recruitment and retention efforts related to diverse teaching candidates, administrators, and staff. And finally, we conducted a landscape scan to understand how each school building understood equity in the various practices that they implemented at the building level. So within this area, we asked what strategies to promote equity are being used within each building at Lmsd, and in what ways have these strategies changed over time. So I'm going to start with our findings related to professional development opportunities. And our approach to understanding Lmsd professional development opportunities centered on 3 key data collection activities. So 1, we conducted a document review, and this included a review of the different types of programs offered as well as the topics covered. We also reviewed any types of tools that were provided to educators to facilitate implementation from these learnings into the classroom. Second, we conducted surveys. So we conducted a district-wide teacher, student, and caregiver survey. And the surveys focused on perceived changes in teaching approaches and strategies due to professional learning, teacher motivation and self-efficacy in teaching the curriculum, as well as their perceptions on access to organizational support. And third, we conducted 8 focus groups with a sample of Lmsd administrators, teachers, and counselors that represent the 11 schools within the district to understand qualitatively the successes and barriers related to implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion curriculum. And we found that overall, educators were positive about their diversity, equity, inclusion, and professional development experiences. However, educators of color were more likely to say that did not meet their expectations. Educators of color were also more likely to say that they were able to easily incorporate the learnings from these professional development opportunities into their practices at Lmsd. So we don't know specifically why educators of color rated the professional development as lower compared to white educators, but in the next section, I'll provide some areas of strength and needs for improvement related to professional learning. In the survey and focus groups, we asked educators about their feedback related to DEI-PD, and they said that strong relationships with colleagues was a necessary foundation to begin conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as one educator wrote in the survey, I need to feel comfortable with the group because I need them to know who I am at the core. I feel like the things I say could be misinterpreted if people don't know me, and it makes me less inclined to share. So as this educator really exemplifies this larger theme related to building strong relationships in order to facilitate important conversations around equity and inclusion in the classroom. When asked what would make diversity, equity, inclusion, professional learning opportunities easier to implement into your classrooms at Lmsb, nearly 1/3 of educators said that professional learning that included specific lessons, strategies, and resources were more useful in preparing them to implement what they learned into the classroom. So in addition to concrete strategies, educators also emphasized the need for opportunities for practice and observation. In particular, this educator noted that concrete strategies, watching people that have mastered lessons from them, and a list of guiding questions to discover biases I might have would be most helpful in implementing professional learnings into the classroom. Both focus group and survey participants said diversity, equity, and inclusion professional development is most effective when it can apply to each individual. And this includes individuals' own knowledge and experience related to implementing equity practices in the classroom. As one educator noted, at some point, training must provide a useful assessment to help determine where we all stand on the continuum of diversity, equity, and inclusion as it pertains to knowledge, skill, and practice. A one-size-fits-all program are deterring faculty from staying connected to the training. So these educators really noted the importance of making sure that training is tailored to fit each individual's needs in order to make sure it's relevant and personalized so they can implement it in their classrooms. Educators said that professional learning that allowed them continued opportunities to go deeper into a specific topic was most useful for their personal and professional growth. As this educator noted, we need to think long-term, as they said, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, in order to develop a learning plan that allows educators to investigate topics deeper and allow these topics to build upon each other. Finally, an affirming culture is crucial to DEI learning. Educators noted the benefits of a supportive district in building administration. As this educator wrote, the fact that the district has always supported the core principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion has made it feel like it was okay to advocate for these core ideas with my students, and it wasn't ever controversial. As this educator noted, and as other educators noted in our conversations and on the survey, administrative support fosters greater trust and willingness to use equity practices within the classroom. Several recommendations from the survey and focus group participants are listed here. And so these related to both the format as well as the culture of professional development at Lmsb. So I'm first going to touch on some recommendations related to the format. So educators emphasize the need for more opportunities for practice and observation related to equity practices in their classrooms. And they also suggested that professional development be personalized, and they identified 3 key ways that this could be personalized. For one, it could differ by grade band and/or content area. It could also differ by different student identities and really understanding how to engage students with multiple identities. In particular, educators noted the desire for more support related to understanding how to support their emergent bilingual students in their classrooms. And as we noted earlier, it could also be personalized by level of diversity, equity, inclusion understanding. One recommendation to facilitate consistency and continuity is to align professional development learning opportunities across the district. So an intentional approach for planning professional development could allow educators to build experiences on each other. In addition, our participants as well as advisory group provided some recommendations related to building supportive relationships and an affirming culture around professional development. One of those was structuring professional development into small groups as a way to build strong relationships and more opportunities for individuals to provide feedback and reflection. One way to build these small group times into Lmsb current structures is to use the professional learning communities as spaces for educators to extend their learning from professional development into small group conversations. In addition, educators could serve as leaders and coaches to help their peers learn equity skills while building relationships with colleagues. And as we noted, survey participants and focus group participants noted that administrative support is crucial to building an inclusive culture. And in particular, educators noted that in the current socio-political context, and resulting politicized learning environment can make them hesitant to approach DEI topics in the classroom. So administrative support can give educators confidence in using those practices. Finally, survey participants suggested that the district could develop some sort of accountability measures for implementing DEI professional development to ensure that all educators implement what they're learning into the classroom. So I'm going to pause there for a second to see if there's any initial questions or reactions to these findings related to professional learning at LMSD.
Mr. Moore?
Sure. I was just curious, you mentioned earlier in your presentation around some of the disparities between some of the teachers of color in terms of how they related to the efficacy.
Okay, we'll keep moving forward. The second section is related to our findings on curriculum, instruction, and pedagogy.
Like, now I have to come over here. Hold on 1 second, I have to turn this. I'm
So-
sorry, Emmy, excuse me, I'm so sorry. You were unable to hear Mr. Mooring. He does have some questions. So I think we're going to have Dr. McGloin come up, and the board
he's gonna
director
only hear
will
from that
ask a question, and she kind of have to translate it for you. So sorry about that.
No worries, thank you.
So my question was related to the difference between how some of the teachers of color were understanding the materials and, well, feeling that it was as that they were getting as much out of it. And so I'm just wondering whether or not what we've done to be kind of look into that. And so it may be more of a question for you than for her, but just in terms of what are the next steps into making sure that we're getting the most out of the professional development training.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So we did have some conversations about, we know that we want to personalize our professional development. We've actually done some of that through goal setting with our staff at the secondary level. We're talking about what is that going to look like in the elementary level, and then how do we move it forward and talk about an accountability measure for it as well this summer. So that'll be part of the work that we do, but personalization, I think, is probably going to move us in that direction. I think we need to ask some more questions, though, of our educators of color to get a really good feel for exactly why they answered the way that they did. And so we have not done that yet, but it is something that we need to investigate more.
Following up on that, I find the results to be really unremarkable and actually track with what you would expect to see given the experience of our staff and the demographics of our staff. What resources is the district using to even plan professional developments? How do DEIB professional developments look different than regular professional developments? How are the spaces? It's not just the PD, but all the factors of the school environment and culture that go into the findings represented here. How is the district and administration looking into those and prioritizing that? And who are we using to help? Because if we're already here, it's no disrespect, but we need additional support, and how are we prioritizing it?
Right, so some of our professional development is actually not delivered internally. It's delivered by outside providers such as Sage Wellness. And they're actually a really big partner for us. Shwana is part of the conversations. Jen is part of the, Dr. Gaudioso is as well part of the conversations about how we're delivering them, delivering the staff development. And so it is through both internal and outside partners that we have. Some of it's done in the buildings, not just done at a district level. Often you'll see staff development around DEIB delivered at the building level through their 5-hour collaboration time, book studies, and so forth.
But do you have a scope and sequence for the year to prioritize DEIB training separately from curriculum instruction pedagogy, or it's just an edict put out that it needs to be inclusive in the overall training?
Right, so some of it is part of the district plan. So everybody participates in a 2-hour session, a PRP session, that is consistent across the whole entire district. That happens no matter who the professional staff member is. So that is part of the training. And then sometimes it happens within the curriculum instruction realm, meaning like in social studies. We have a training coming up in another week for our social studies staff at the middle level. So sometimes
So the
it's a little
answer
bit
is
of
no.
both.
So a 2-hour PD is the current requirement for our staff for DEIB training?
At the district level, and then there's additional trainings after that, yes.
Okay, so I'd be interested in seeing the actual scope and sequence for DEIB trainings that are separate from our other trainings and how we're actually prioritizing that as a goal for our staff and our district as a community.
Okay. Yep.
May I respond to that? So, one of the things we have to remember is that, and a lot of times we talk about equity work as if it's something separate. Equity work should be embedded in everything that we do, and I've said this multiple times. So sometimes maybe it's identifying where the equity component is in professional development that we're providing to staff, and we do have additional partners that we're using. So I wasn't here for the beginning part of this, but since I've been here, I've been trying to connect all these dots. We are working with the University of Pennsylvania as well to provide some of our support and training for our staff. And so now having the equity director looking at this study, having conversations, being in buildings, but we can't keep saying that it's going to be something separate. It has to be embedded in everything we do, every day, every conversation that we're having. It's all a part of equity.
I don't disagree with you, and also, with respect, without an intentional focus and differentiating the professional development in our district beyond a 2-hour required training, we can't actually say the experience, how we are prioritizing the experience, or actually developing our staff and necessary skills to be able to serve our students in the way that our mission and vision and commitment to anti-racism articulates. And so I think it is a both and I'm grateful for your position and look forward to the plan for next year and seeing how we actually articulate that as required training for staff.
Agreed. But I do want to just highlight that part too. And we're just receiving this. You've been working on this for multiple years, and we're now having a document. So you're not going to be able to tackle everything in the document. So you're going to have to prioritize what are those components. But I would say that staff members are receiving more than 2 hours with Sage Wellness. They are receiving support again from the University of Pennsylvania and some of the other partners that we have. We have Gene Stanley that provides support in other areas of the equity work. So maybe it's outlining all of the partners that we have to at least get started with this conversation, because it is way more than the 2 hours PRP. I provided quite a few hours myself with professional development. That's in addition to what is occurring with Sage Wellness.
Thank you, and I just wanted to sort of bring it back or sort of follow up again on the idea of an overall view, and not of just the DEIB training, but the overall professional development with, and maybe it makes sense to have that DEIB pieces sort of highlighted or asterisk or something, right? So that you can see which pieces of it are, although I hear what you're saying about it really needs to be part of everything. But I think an overall sort of plan of all of the professional developing, because, you know, all of the different programs we do and all the different things that we talk about all have the recommendation for additional professional development, where it just feels like, you know, we're adding on for this and this and this and this, and sort of an overall picture, just to follow up on what Ms. Shirak was saying, it would be very helpful.
Yeah, we are working on that to give you a scope for the year. Traditionally, when we put that out, it's just our staff development opportunities, but I think, you know, we've had this conversation. Our training doesn't just happen during the half-day and full-day sessions. We would never be able to really have our staff fully trained if we did that. So, but we are working on something right now. Yeah.
Are you going back in?
Yeah, they have 3 more. Yeah.
Do you mind, this is just about PD.
This one's just about PD.
My question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple questions. So I'm on slide 6, just as I'm looking at these data points that you're making on the next
Can
few.
you go to slide 6?
Oh, you don't have to, but just to reference where they're going. So you talk about our approach to understanding LMSD professional development opportunities has 3 different data inputs. So document review, teacher-wide surveys. I'm a little confused by the teacher surveys, the student surveys, and the caregiver surveys for PDs, and then conduct focus groups. So are the 3 ways you're capturing data for professional development alone?
So the question is, are there 3 ways that you're capturing data for professional development alone?
No, these encompassed all 4 sections of our study. And so we had specific questions related to professional learning, but we also had questions related to experiences with staff hiring and onboarding, as well as implementing culturally responsive curriculum too, which we'll go to next.
Okay, and this might be for future review, but I'd like to understand when you're looking at the next slide, slide 7. Overall, educators were positive about their DEI professional development experiences, though educators of color, so were white educators positive and educators of color, and let's define those. But did you triangulate any of the data? So were they saying that in a focus group? And could you then reference the focus group off the comments to kind of pull from there? What was it? And I'm not sure you have that, because that first slide confused me. I wasn't sure you had more than one data point on this spot. Did you get that?
Yeah, we didn't disaggregate, I guess, like focus group data depending on student or educator identity and their experiences within that. We did, later on we'll touch on, we did look specifically at conducting a BIPOC educator focus group specifically for staff hiring, but we didn't do that specifically for these professional learning opportunities to really pull out what educators of color were experiencing and how that might be different than white educators in the district.
Okay, and last question, slide 8, for example. So you're making a generalized, I'm assuming, just correct me if I get this wrong, the generalized statement at the top is your finding in orange, and then the gray statement or black statement, educators said that strong relationships with colleagues. Is that like a significant statement? Like, was that like a significant sampling of the data? And then what was the base amount of data? I guess I really want to see your data packets and their surveys to show us how many people were answering what, how many people answered it overall. And then did you have open-ended questions as well in there? And then I'll stop.
Yeah, all of that. And actually, I might kick it over to you if you, I know you're closer to that data.
Yeah, absolutely. So for these slides that are kind of our big high-level finding slides, yes, they are the themes that we saw that ran through all of our data, and we pulled these out as kind of example quotes that either came, this one, for example, came from the survey. We have a couple of others that came from focus groups, but kind of pulled out some example quotes that were reminiscent of the themes that we saw broadly. We also gave these themes back again to the advisory group and let them help reflect on these and see the way that they are embedded within LMSD context and kind of the history of professional learning. And so that's kind of, it's a little bit hard. I would say a lot of the research that you might see normally will pull out one data source and then this, like, here it is, and then but we really kind of looked at these themes across all data sources and tried to kind of pull themes that were reflected in each, because we collected, you'll get access to our instruments shortly as soon as they're made ADA accessible for being online. But we have a lot of data, we have a lot of information. And so we really kind of tried to pull out those things that were most strongly indicated within the data to show here. And the reports also have a little bit more detail on where each kind of finding came from more specifically. But for the surveys, we had, oh goodness, it's a pretty high response rate among educators. I'm not gonna be able to remember the exact number now, but pretty high response rate among educators. So most educators did respond to this, and we had quite a few open-ended responses to sift through. We had 3 major questions that we asked, and I'd say 2/3 to 3/4 of respondents answered all 3 questions. So quite a lot of data to sift through, probably, what would that be? 1,000 plus open-ended responses. Does that help?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
great.
I think we're good to move to the next study? Yes? Okay.
Okay, great, thank you. So our next section will cover our inquiry into Lmsb curriculum instruction and pedagogical practices.
Be able to do it.
And we had 4 key data collection activities that informed this area of inquiry. First, we reviewed Lmsd English Language Arts textbooks, teacher manuals, handout, book list, presentation materials, and readings, using a culturally responsive teaching rubric to understand the extent to which they promote an inclusive and culturally responsive lens to teaching. We also administered the district-wide teacher survey to understand teacher instructional practices, pedagogy, and implementation of DEI curricula. We implemented teacher or caregiver and student surveys to understand their experiences with the curriculum. And then fourth, we also conducted classroom observations. So we trained administrators within each of the buildings to be observers using a culturally responsive classroom observation rubric as well as a school environment rubric. They were randomly selected classrooms to observe within different buildings and reported data back to us to inform this data collection. So one key component to culturally responsive practices is creating a learning environment that is physically and culturally inviting. So students need to see themselves within and their cultures respectfully reflected in pictures, displays, and on the classroom walls. And through the school and classroom observations, we found that Lmsd does create common spaces in classrooms that reflect diverse identities, cultures, and abilities. So for example, in the school and classroom observations, we found that all students have physically accessible school facilities. Most schools' common spaces show diverse family structures, people of different races, gender expressions, ethnicities, and abilities regularly. And most schools' front offices were warm, inviting, and accessible to all students. Similarly, in the survey, many students felt that their classroom environments reflect a variety of cultures and experiences. However, we did see that this was less for students of color in secondary school. So on this chart here, we can see that around 40% of white secondary students found that almost all of their classroom environments reflect a variety of cultures and experiences, while only 30% of students of color indicated the same. Next, we'll discuss student experiences with Lmsd curriculum. So common elements of culturally responsive curriculum include representation of diverse perspectives, authors, characters, a focus on social justice, as well as customizing curriculum to meet each student's unique needs. And many students said that they did read texts from authors from diverse backgrounds and identities in some or almost all of their classes. And the curriculum review also confirms that most classes have literature by diverse authors and opportunities to explore different viewpoints. In the district-wide educator survey, we asked educators to reflect on their experiences implementing culturally responsive curriculum. And in analyzing the data, we did see differences between educators of color and white educators. In particular, educators of color rated their efficacy as higher across 3 dimensions of culturally responsive curriculum development. Those included designing lessons and implementing the activities that explore different cultures, revising instructional materials to honor and elevate various cultural groups, and selecting culturally and linguistically appropriate assessments and making modifications as necessary. When asked how often experiences across diverse identities are reflected in your homework assignments, elementary students and secondary students of color are less likely than white students to indicate that Lmsd classroom assignments reflect a variety of cultures. So although students say that they read texts by diverse authors, less find diversity integrated into their classroom assignments. Culturally responsive instruction and pedagogy incorporates students' lived experiences and frames of reference into the teaching of academic knowledge to make their learning experiences more personally meaningful. And a culturally responsive teacher forms relationships between students and families, including collaborating with families and local community, communicating in culturally and linguistically responsive ways. So, however, all educators, but particularly white educators, express slightly lower levels of efficacy in developing culturally specific communication strategies. Similarly, in the surveys, we asked students to reflect on how their own experiences are incorporated into classroom instruction. We found that secondary students of color were less likely to indicate that their teachers incorporate their background and experiences into teaching practices. So overall, we found that Lmsb creates spaces in classrooms that reflect diverse cultures, identities, and abilities, and that most students read texts by diverse authors and have opportunities to explore different points of view within those texts. However, while educators do create these welcoming learning environments, fewer express efficacy in creating culturally specific relationship strategies and fostering family engagement. And students of color were less likely to indicate that their teachers incorporate their backgrounds and experiences into their teaching practices. Another key component of culturally responsive curriculum is developing a broader socio-political consciousness in students to create different social norms and institutions that produce social inequities. However, fewer students say that they encounter issues of social justice within their classroom assignments, and this is even less for students of color compared to white students. So in this chart here, we can see that around 47% of secondary students of color encountered issues of social justice in their classroom assignments compared to 57% of their white peers. And this is confirmed by the curriculum review, where we saw less evidence of opportunities for students to foster a sense of personal advocacy and explore issues of social justice in the classroom. So educators, as well as our advisory group, offered several recommendations for district-wide support to implement culturally responsive curriculum. For one, the district could use a screening tool to center equity in curriculum. So educators and Lmsd personnel could use different screening tools to look at curriculum materials and evaluate for them for biases. Currently, Lmsd is screening curriculum using the culturally responsive curriculum scorecard developed by NYU, but they could use the same scorecard developed to evaluate existing curriculum in the district as well. Curriculum reviews are also designed to be collaborative processes that engage educators, family members, families, community members, and students. And so Lmsd could provide opportunities for educator collaboration, such as through different communities of practice or talking circles. And these could allow community members and families to share their funds of knowledge with educators to implement those in the classroom. Literature selections could also be reviewed for bias, and using a comprehensive matrix that accounts for BIPOC representation and affirms diverse perspectives and contemporary contributions. Educators also noted that they would like additional support from the district in forming relationships with families and communities. In particular, educators wanted more support, as we noted earlier, help with connecting with their emergent bilingual students and their families. And similar to our professional development findings, educators would like some practical guidance to implement culturally responsive teaching practices in the classrooms. And this could to ensure that this implementation differs by content area and grade band. And finally, it was recommended that Lmsd continue to build organizational infrastructure to support culturally responsive teaching and to align practices across the district, so all educators share this equity work. And we can see the hiring of the new DI director as one step in this direction of building this organizational infrastructure. So I'm going to pause here again and open it up to any questions related to curriculum instruction and pedagogy.
She might be able to hear them. She did great. Oh, God. Okay. Are there any questions?
I think we can move on.
You can keep going.
Okay. So our third section is related to workforce diversity and staff hiring. And to better understand LMSD staff hiring and diversity practices, we reviewed documentation. So this included staff hiring data at LMSD and human resources policies and documentation. We conducted focus groups, so there's 8 focus groups with LMSD administrators, teachers, and counselors. And we conducted a specific focus group with BIPOC educators and one for BIPOC administrators. We interviewed the human resources team at the district, as well as conducted an educator survey. And we had specific questions on that survey for educators who had participated in hiring committees. So to start, we compared LMSD staff demographics to that of the state. And when looking at the staff demographics, we can see that LMSD staff tend to be more diverse. So about 10% of educators at LMSD identify as BIPOC, compared to 5% within the state. However, we can still see that this is low numbers, but it also sheds light on some of the external recruitment issues that might be impacting staff hiring at LMSD. And across the board, educators, high school students of color, as well as white high school students all agree that LMSD needs more diverse staff members. LMSD uses a variety of methods to recruit and hire diverse candidates. So these strategies include, but aren't limited to, recruitment fairs, partnerships, advertising, principal engagement, as well as investing in teacher salaries and benefits. However, many noted that these external issues can impact recruitment efforts. And so this is a quote from one administrator focus group. My impression is that LMSD is taking vigorous measures to find diverse candidates and to support them once hired. The reality is that for systemic reasons, there are not as many diverse educators as would be ideal. Many of them do not choose to work in a predominantly white suburban school district. Interviewees also emphasized the importance of intentionally selecting candidates who have an aptitude for diversity, equity, and inclusion. As this focus group participant noted, we need to take it back to the application and hiring process as far as what questions are being asked when people are interviewed. You can't force everyone to be on the same page, but there's a huge difference between teaching a lesson that you feel is real and then just doing it because you have to teach this cultural proficiency lesson. And survey participants and interviewees noted that LMSD has made progress in this area. For example, the district's Achievement Imperative Task Force is developing a standard of diversity, equity, inclusion questions to ask of all potential hires. And in the survey, educators who had participated on hiring committees agreed that the scoring rubric and interview process helped them to identify candidates who demonstrated equity skills and promoted an equity mindset. However, in interviews with BIPOC educators, many described challenges navigating the hiring process. This included confusion about the steps in the interview process, as well as experiences with microaggressions during that process. One focus group participant noted, "I wouldn't have made it through the process if I didn't have existing relationships at the district." That's something that needs to be considered if you're trying to get a person of color into a predominantly white institution. There has to be a process helping them navigate it, to have the courage to approach it, because it already comes with barriers that are invisible. We also looked at issues that can impact staff retention. And educators of color node described ongoing feelings of isolation. And without school or administrative support, isolation can negatively impact staff retention. This educator noted feeling like I work in a bubble, I don't know what any other building does, I'm the only Black person I see all day long, all year long. In addition to feeling isolated, educators of color described feeling an added burden from the district staff as well as families to promote equity efforts and to represent students of color. So feeling undervalued, stressed, and overworked can also lead to burnout and fatigue. This educator noted this as the token tax or the expectation that you have to bear the responsibility of additional duties. In addition to everything else you do, you are now the Black mentor for everything Black in the building. From a retention standpoint, it's overwhelming. Finally, a lack of leadership opportunities can also negatively impact staff retention. Interviewees noted that there isn't a formal pipeline to leadership opportunities. And in such a high-profile and demanding district, administrators often recommend that less experienced candidates seek experience elsewhere before returning to Lmsd. As this administrator described, we'll see someone who isn't necessarily of the caliber that we want to see. I could name a number of different people that left the district to get leadership opportunities because we don't have a formal pipeline to speak of. Because it is such a demanding district with parents with high expectations, I think we're often fearful of allowing someone to take their lumps in such a high-profile role here. We were also provided recommendations from these administrators, educators, as well as our advisory group related to workforce diversity and staff hiring. So for one, interviewees recommended that the district actively encourage educators of color to apply for open positions and then support those applicants through the hiring process. Educators recommended that early support and onboarding for new staff of color, as well as developing an affinity group so that educators of color can build community among teachers across the district would be helpful. And with the hiring of the new EDI director, we've seen a resurgence of the Mosaic Affinity Group for educators of color. Educators also stressed that equity work should be shared by all staff members. And to help with this, the district would provide all staff members with professional development to improve the school's racial climate. So linking back to our professional development findings. An increased transparency around candidate selection, pay, equity, and promotions could support educators of color accessing learning from the recruitment process and as well as approaching it. And then finally, rather than recommend, educators recommended that the district create networks and professional learning opportunities for BIPOC educators interested in becoming administrators so that they could develop the skills internally to become school and district leaders. So I'm going to pause there again before we go into our final section to see if there was any questions related to these findings.
I think we can continue to move on and just ask questions at the end.
Okay, I'll tell her. Mimi, I think we're going to just go ahead and have you finish through the end, and then they'll hold their questions. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. So our final section was related to the landscape scan. So this provides an overview of some of the findings we found within each of the schools. We asked school principals and diversity, equity, inclusion leads within each of the school about their strategies that they use to promote equity and the ways in which these strategies have changed over time. And the development of this landscape scan really emerged from our site visit out to Lower Merion last fall, where we talked to principals and school leaders and learned that each school has its unique culture as well as own way for promoting equity. And so really to ensure that any future equity work by the district builds upon some of the great work that's already being done at the building level. So I'm first going to present some findings that were common across all the schools that we talked to. And then I'm going to highlight some building level bright spots, so some key things that buildings were doing that were particularly innovative in approaching equity. So across all schools, we found that all schools said that their DEI practices had progressed in recent years due to professional learning, thoughtful conversation, and support from the district office. Most schools described the importance of their DEI team or cultural proficiency team in supporting DEI work at their schools. And most schools had also developed some sort of student affinity group to create a safe space for students of color to share their experiences and get support. Most schools said that their district's partnerships with DI consultants, as Alexis mentioned too, like Sage Wellness, were important opportunities for staff professional development, as well as providing one-on-one engagement with principals and really tailoring their practices to each school's specific culture and unique needs related to equity. And overall, we saw that there's an energy within the district to learn about restorative practices, and administrators were excited to see the way that plays out in future professional learning opportunities. Next, I'd like to highlight some building level bright spots that are happening across the district. So these are some innovative supports that we've seen building administrators and leaders provide for educators. So some school administrators are providing grants of about like $500 to $1,000 to support staff's DEI ideas, projects, and activities. So in this way, staff are provided the opportunity to take on leadership around their school's DEI efforts. Schools are also making connections with families and communities through dinners, picnics, ice cream socials, and potlucks. So these events provide spaces for families to build mutual support, share their traditions, and form community. Some schools are also implementing opportunity for staff reflection, and so these include staff anti-bias assessments or curriculum homework reflections, where all staff look at their instruction, biases, and possible microaggressions in the classroom. Staff are also offered opportunities to learn and discuss DEI-related strategies and challenges through book clubs, equity action groups, community circles, and courageous conversations. And finally, we found that administrators and DEI leadership at schools are creating a repository of different resources for DEI work and culturally responsive teaching for their educators to access and to support their work within the building. And finally, we have some recommendations for district level support for building level DEI efforts. And for one, districts could develop an alignment of DEI approach through their professional development, so similar to a finding we found within that professional learning opportunities. So a year at a glance or like an equity framework that's aligned with the equity policy could be helpful in aligning district-wide efforts. Schools could also use more support, resources, and strategies in connecting in meaningful ways with families. And in particular, as we mentioned earlier, around their immersion bilingual students. Educators noted that more opportunities from the district around DEI professional development and integrating more equitable curriculum would be helpful at the building level. And principals and leadership also noted that their educators within their schools would like to take on more leadership positions and have the opportunity to share best practices and drive change. And so we can see this already happening with the development of different DEI leads within each school. And schools would also like to increase their staff diversity, and they recommended that school leadership as well as the district tap into the professional networks of support staff and educators to continue to screen candidates for their aptitude for equity, as well as continuing to develop some of these educator affinity groups and mentoring opportunities at the district level. And just quick next steps. So after this presentation, we will be releasing 4 research briefs, as well as a technical appendix with all of our survey findings, protocols, curriculum review, and observation rubrics as well, for a deeper dive into some of these findings. And so, yeah, I'll stop here for any questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I think that we have asked the questions this evening earlier in the presentation. I did want to note that this presentation had also been provided at the curriculum committee of the board, I think several months ago, so there was a lot of conversation at that time around what was going on, and also there were some points that I think were brought up this evening about some steps the district has already taken, like around the hiring practices. And I bring that up just to point out that there is ongoing work and work going on while during this process. And as was mentioned, the 4 reports will be available on the website once the once it goes through the accessibility process, but that they will be available in the near future.
Thank you, Emmy. Thank you, Ashley. It's Ashley, right?
Thank you very much.
All right, so now, okay, here we go. All right.
Okay, so moving along on our agenda, we do not have any additional new agenda items for this evening, so we will move to audience recognition. At this time, Ms. LaPera will open the chat feature, and you will see a 10-minute timer appear on your screen at home. You can submit your comments and/or questions via the chat feature. Please be sure to begin your full name and where you reside within the district in order for your comment to be shared. That is true as well for in-person public comment. Please make sure that you start your comments with your name and address. And again, it doesn't need to be specific address, just neighborhood within the district that you live is fine. Ms. LaPera, do we have any in-person comments? I'm sure that we do. I don't believe I see any students. We generally try to allow our students to
There's no one
speak
signed in on the
first.
student list.
Thank you, Ms. LaPera.
Jan, you're first, then Jamie Singer, Jeff Brody, and then Ezra Wood.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jan Turvish from Wynwood. I'm here on behalf of the Lower Merion Heritage students. They're very busy. It's the end of the school year. I want to congratulate everybody. AP finals, some people have gone behind them, some people have a few left. And then Noah wanted me to say that she was busy working on her documentary on Oakwell this morning. Saw her out there hard at work, so anybody's worried, rest assured. Also, Sam Dugani working on his finals, and little Greta Agnew is busy getting ready for bed. It's bedtime. So, but I do have something on behalf. It's not often that the school board and many of the decision makers get a gift from the work that's been done by both Villanova students and Heritage students. I think it's going to be a wonderful example of not just Lower Merion excellence, but township excellence here. And so I'm going to pass it off to some of you. It's from the students. And then there's even senior admins, oftentimes forgotten, but they work just as hard behind the scenes. So if you open that up, they'll be back in June to really talk about their vision. I know Lower Merion is constrained in what it can do on that site, but there are other entities that are around that can provide both the horticultural facilities and the know-how and the training, and then there are other institutions that have the resources with an overlay of Black Rock Middle School functions, right? There is Black Rock Middle School functions from cross-country, volleyball, ultimate frisbee, running around, even if it is just having a place to do art. Noah was mentioning how well this proposal documents that aspect of preserving the having more learning, right? This element of more learning, more play, more education on a site that I think everybody has a lot of interest in cultivating and really elevating and having its best. I understand that there are other places in the township, and with time, opportunities to build playing fields. The school board has been very dynamic in looking at alternatives like the playing fields in Haverford, and I think both the students, both at Villanova and here in our own district, are confident that a resolution will be found that is in the interest of everybody, and something that they can all go home quite proud of in the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Jamie Singer, Penn Valley. I'm also an Oakwellian. We do have PDFs of this proposal, which is really a thoughtful and remarkable proposal put together by students of Villanova, and we can send you the PDF as well. It's an extraordinary effort in terms of rendering ideas, images, an opportunity for education, an opportunity for recreation, an opportunity for reflection. The other thing that I want to say aside from this is, we're still thinking about, really hard, about places, other places for fields, and we know that fields are important. We know that Villanova is still interested in purchasing this property. You can recoup your money, and you have other programs as well that your Healthy Start program, your all-day kindergarten programs. These are also initiatives that affect, in some cases, all the students. We also know that the Jewish Federation is divesting itself of its real estate, and so there may well be opportunities. Initially there was an opportunity that the timing didn't work out well for fields at the JCC. Well, there's a 22-acre property there, and maybe there's some opportunities there, as well as the property, I know it's in Delaware County, but the property where Jack and Barrack Hebrew School is and the Federation is, that's a 35-acre property, and you are negotiating now, with another entity with the Polo Fields in Haverford Township. So I'm just wondering whether there can be we can look at some opportunities for some fields that can support everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Singer.
Good evening. I'm Jeff Brody from Bala-Cynwyd. So I haven't been able to make any of the earlier meetings when Healthy Start Times was on the agenda, but I'm here now. So I want to continue to express my thanks to the entire board and administration for continuing to move this forward, and 2024 will be an answer, right? And I appreciate that. I also want to re-express, since March, the coalescing around the board on moving this forward for 2024. I think that's really important for our community, and to continue to see that happen even here tonight as more information is being presented is it's really important, really significant. So thank you all. I do want to share some light on this middle school start time thing. I looked it up as the presentation was going at my son's, my 7th grader's power school schedule, and it's on his power school schedule, attendance and arrival, 8 to 8:15. His first period is 8:19. So my son goes from the first floor, his math class, that's where he goes for I&E, so that's where he goes for homeroom. He then travels down the stairwell and somewhere in BC, I still can't figure it out, to his first period. And then back up to math 2 periods later. My elementary school son, his arrival's 9 a.m., attendance is after 9 for a period of time, right? That's our schedule. I don't have a high schooler yet, but I do know that the high schooler guidebook does not have an attendance and arrival period like middle school. So I just want to be clear. Now, maybe 8 a.m. was put in there for the report, into the guide, because maybe we're trying to inch our way forward to some sort of start time of 8 a.m. at some point. But let's just be clear about that, and I really want to make sure that's known. Also, we are a walk zone for middle, a bus for elementary. Whatever, no problem with that. But I can tell you consistently, because we drive our son to middle school, Ballackinwood, every morning, that his bus, number 85, along with 5 to 7 other buses, sit at Amherst Field, right, at 7:45, 7:50 in the morning. And that bus 85 is important to me because my elementary school kid gets picked up at 8:25, right? And sometimes we're there a little early. And by the way, there are still a handful of buses still coming through the circle between 7:45 and 7:50. So that's a rough math. I mean, I'm not a paid staff person, I'm not going to do the survey, but I just want to give some insight that maybe some more digging, again, I know I communicated this before, more digging, more support for our transportation department, maybe more support for our middle school administration scheduling to really understand what that morning could look like. Heck, if attendance could be taken at that first period instead of at this attendance and arrival thing, that's key. Also, I'm sorry, I just want to point this, what happens in those 15 minutes is the morning announcements. That's why we have to be there, because if we don't go there, we don't know what's going on, right? So maybe that can be repositioned as well, and we just saved ourselves a chunk of time. So thank you again, looking forward to June.
Thank you.
Ezra Wood, then we have Ruth Jenkin, and Gwen Weinberg, and Greta Gilbald.
All right, thank you. I'm Ezra Wood, Marion Station. I'm a father of 3 middle school students, and I want to touch on the same thing. This idea that they're not marked late unless they're coming after 8:15 is just simply not true. My 2 fifth graders are twins. They are, terrified of showing up after 8:08, and they want to rush and get there at 8 o'clock. They really, it's not just my kids. I know plenty of fifth graders especially who want to get there. They think they have to be there at 8 o'clock. So between what you're saying, what the principal says, what teacher says, it'd be nice to all be on the same page. And just jumping ahead, yes, let's get rid of homeroom. I mean, it's just, I talked to my 8th grader, my 5th graders, their friends, and they're like, yeah, we hear announcements. There's nothing, maybe a few of them like it, and it's not, they're getting announcements out of it. It's not that big a deal. So let's get rid of that. Right, I'm a father of 3 middle schoolers, including, I have 11-year-old twins. One's a boy, one's a girl. Guess which one's going through puberty right now? Right, the girl, right? Because girls go through puberty earlier. We brought this up. When you go through puberty, that's when the circadian rhythm shifts. That's when the early start times start to really suck for you. So of my 2 kids, my 2 fifth graders, it's my daughter who's really hating the mornings now and not my son, right? This issue came up before. We kind of swallowed it and said, well, at least, for whatever reason, we can't have elementary school go first. Okay, and this is still an overall improvement. I get it. But it's just disturbing to be seeing that the start time is getting earlier and earlier and earlier. So last year, it was 8:15, and not this year. Last year, middle school was 8:15. And that was too early, right? 8:30 is the recommended earliest possible start time. 8:30 is not the recommended start time, it's the recommended earliest start time. Okay, so 8:15 last year was already too early for middle school. This year, it's basically call it 8:10. That's 5 minutes. Like that's kind of crappy. 8 o'clock was already kind of a bad compromise that we said, okay, that's better overall. It's not as bad as 7:30, but it's a compromise. At least that we're 8 o'clock, then not doing 7:30, doing 8:40 for high school. Okay, you'll be better off overall. Kind of a unhappy compromise, but there we go. So I remind and 7:55, 7:45, I think it should be off the table. I remind how we started tonight's meeting. Pledge of Allegiance. And then we discussed the latest, disturbing event among middle schoolers and threatening messages, et cetera. It was Black Rock today. It was BC last Friday, a separate incident. There's a school shooting text between 5th graders 3 weeks ago. I'm starting to lose track of these. So these middle schoolers are not making good decisions right now. And I guarantee that depriving them of more sleep is not going to help with their decision making. So I really think that at 8 o'clock should be the absolute earliest. I'm going to go back also, sorry, it's not just that girls go through puberty early, it's also African-American girls go through even earlier.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
My friend, who speaks for the trees, and think about the equity of, Ruth Jenkins, Winwood. the equity of taking down those trees. It would destroy a neighborhood, it would destroy the opportunity for students who live in less dense neighborhoods to explore something like Oakwell. Couple of things. The equity meeting that was supposed to be on, my Zoom was not connected to it. Was there a problem with it? The Zoom that usually works did not work on Wednesday last week. The bus presentation 2 weeks ago was extraordinary. The arrangements that he is able to make is just mind-boggling. I also would like to say that with full-day kindergarten, you have two less routines to deal with. You don't have a pickup in the 12 o'clock, and you have a drop-off at 12 o'clock. So you only have again, that eliminates that extra situation. Why are there no seatbelts on the buses? I know that when I drove my 4 kids around, I could at least reach them in the back and like settle down back there. But if you got 20 kids on a bus and acting up and something happens, that bus driver is concentrating on traffic and concentrating on some misbehavior in the back of the bus. In terms of seatbelts and maybe even aids on buses where aids are needed. The other thing that I just want to mention really quickly is I belong to a group online called Learning Forward, and they discuss a lot of the issues that we discuss here as well. And it's a statewide organization. People come from many different states. And one of the things that they discussed under the equity issue is the principals. That if the principals don't have a buy-in, and if they're not the ones that are really educated on diversity and equity and inclusion and belonging, it's never going to filter down. So it really has to start with the leader in the schools, and I think they need more involvement than what's been presented here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins.
Gwen Weinberg, Greta Gilbod, and Maria Rico.
Hello, hi, I'm Gwen, I'm Winwood. I'm an advocate for Oakwell. I'm also the photographer and a video for them. I'm going to ask you if you have compassion towards Oakwell as far as nature, trees, and their habitat. And also, and if you can please leave it alone. There's plenty of other places that the children can go and play and have a ball field, like what they all said. And I strongly believe that the Oakwell would provide biologists, naturalists, and scientists for the college student, and please let Villanova College buy it. I think it would be so much better because our environment is horrible and the climate is disgrace. And the student would learn a lot. That's it.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Greta Gilbod. I live in Marion Station. I'm a brand new parent to the Lower Marion School District, and while I haven't been here in person, I've been listening online, and my husband has been attending in person. This is my first experience with public education. I grew up in New England, and so I'm new to all of this. I can first say thank you to all of you for your service. It's not something that I would do, and so I appreciate all of your efforts because I understand, especially now in these days, serving in public office is probably particularly difficult. You know, my daughter is getting an outstanding education, and I am really glad that I sent her to public school for that reason. But all of the discussions that I've been hearing here really concern me. You know, this healthy start time, but more especially the issues around the threats against students and especially those that seem to be on the margins of society really make me concerned about my daughter's future in this public school system. And so I just implore you to continue to work on these issues and communicate with parents, because we want to be part of the solution, at least I do. I'm actively involved on the board of my son's preschool, and really appreciate the fact that now it seems like we're getting more information. In regards to the healthy start times, I just ask that, you know, Ms. Schaefer, you said we're supposed to follow the science, but we're not following the science around that younger students learn better earlier in the morning. And I know in previous meetings, Ms. Kalish, you suggested that we look at moving elementary school first. And I know, Mr. Lee, you mentioned, well, in 2019, there was such a vitriol response from elementary school students about this. But I do think that this should be explored again. But if you're dead set on going down this path, I really think that 7:45 is too early for middle school. And you know, I just recently looked, it's $581 a month if you want to get before school and after school care through Right at School. That's almost $7,000 a month per kid if you have to do that. I think that's a real burden on some parents in this district, and I think that really needs to be explored as well. So I just ask that you continue to work on this, because I think it affects a lot of us, a lot of working parents, and there has to be better solutions than what's been presented. Thank you.
Thank you.
After Maria, we have Lisa Prosnitz.
Good evening, everybody. Maria Rico from Haverford. And before starting with Healthy Start Times, I would also like to say that I also support the efforts to save Oakwell. I think it's important to consider all the options that lots of people have very, you know, enthusiastically presented. So please listen to them and your students. I have seen students coming every meeting and asking the students to save Oakwell. But anyways, regarding Healthy Start Times, it's not been long since I have been involved, so please, I apologize if I am too silly with my questions. Maybe you have already talked about it and I am not aware, but so is it for sure that it's gonna be implemented in 2024? And thank you. So, and then you say you're voting in June, something regarding Healthy Start Times. What is it exactly that you're gonna vote on?
Can you finish we can address the questions after.
I think that's probably all that I want to say, and thank you very much. I want to also say that I know that serving in a school board is super challenging, lots of extra hours. Your job is very appreciated, but that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the question that about the vote in June, what has been authorized and what the administration has been working on is the implementation of the schedule that was presented. There were some requested modifications, and so as the administration understands it, is that we will come back and the board will decide whether there will be any additional modifications to the schedule with that I presented earlier, and so that would be the vote. So if the vote was to start earlier, for example, I know that we had some comments about that, but if it was middle school was starting at 7:45, that would be part of a vote that they would take in June. to just affirm the schedule and any associated modifications.
So it's just for the schedule, that's what you're going to be voting on? What would be the final schedule?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's the best way to put it. Thank you.
So if any vote we take gets voted down in the June meeting, the schedule that was presented when we voted to approve the change in start times would be the schedule that would happen in 2024? Did I say that really confusingly? Yes, that's right? Okay, thank you.
Wait, can you clarify that? Sorry. So
Sorry, okay. So say the administration puts forth alternative plan XYZ, and the board chooses not to vote for that in June, then what will go forward was the plan that was approved the last time we voted. If the board does vote to approve XYZ, then the specific timing laid out in that particular motion will be what will go forward. Either way, a time change is happening fall 2024. Clear?
No,
Fantastic.
well, not entirely, one question.
Okay.
I was going to ask about this too, but,
So go ahead, we're going to just start your.
okay, all right, then I'll just, Lisa Prosnitz, Penn Valley. There's so much happening that I want to comment on and I'm concerned about, but for now I'm sticking with start times, not to belittle anything else. Want to thank you all and thank you all for continuing to push this forward. While I'm thrilled with the 2024 implementation, I remain very concerned, really, really concerned about the mental health of our students in the district. Recent events across our middle schools, as mentioned at the start of this meeting tonight, are telling us that our kids are still not okay. We've known this for a long time, and things are not getting better, they're getting worse. Having witnessed my own children experiencing the pain, otherwise known as torture, as I've expressed it before in this very spot, of a 7:30 a.m. start in high school, which means a 7 a.m. bus drop-off for some of our students at Harridan, I beg you, not to have any school in the district start before 8 a.m. 8 a.m. is already a compromise. I have no doubt that there are creative solutions we can implement to make the high school schedule work, especially knowing that we'll be matching the length of day in other neighboring districts. I'll also ask that you clarify exactly what will be voted on in June. If you're able to commit to reviewing the policies and propose updates that Ms. Schaefer, you had mentioned at the June meeting, and seeing that there are 3 schedules that have been proposed tonight, does that mean that it's going to be narrowed down to 1 proposal in June, and it's going to be that or the initial proposal? Like, it's a little confusing how that's going to, how that'll play out. And I just want to say that there were a lot of ideas that were brought up tonight, and I'd like to really better understand what additional information will be available for June. Thank you. But if you yeah.
So Ms. Shaver presented earlier 4 bullets on, I think it was like slide 2 of your presentation. So when we approved the schedule in that meeting, I can't remember when, apologize, we said this is what the schedule is going to be, but we want you to work and tweak some of these pieces because we're concerned about how late the kids are getting out. What are younger parents of younger children going to do in the morning with a 9:20 start time, and 2 other main pieces. So what they're working through now is trying to tweak those edges and what does that look like. And so the presentation that you saw tonight was some of those tweaks, leading with those 4 bullets. So the timing stays generally the same. The order stays exactly the same. We've already voted on the order precisely. So when we come back in June, we will look at what, with those tweaks, what are our options, and do we want to make any more modifications on the vote that we had earlier, or do we want to leave it alone? We can also, Shayla was talking about X, Y, and Z. We can also vote X, no, Y, yes, Z, no. So we could uncompartmentalize those as well, if that makes any sense. I don't feel like I made that better, but I took out the PowerPoint, and you can see in that second slide kind of what are the things we're tweaking on the edges. Is that it for,
Sorry,
you.
that was the last in person.
Thank you. Ms. Buckman, can you please read the comments in chat?
Sure. The first comment in the chat is from Dr. Pam Pojamovsky McDonald. I apologize if I mispronounced that, from Wynwood, children at Penn Valley Elementary. I am writing in support of full-day kindergarten and was happy to hear it mentioned even in the context of the difficulties of changing start times. Also, I want to encourage the school district to do more listening from underrepresented staff and to make sure they are being compensated one way or another when doing what is known as minority tax, so that their voices are heard but not at the extra cost. The next comment is from Lorraine Carter of Ardmore. What will occur with the equity report now that it is done aside from distribution? For example, will the research be infused in the district's strategic plan or exist as an interdisciplinary plan or standalone? How soon can a comprehensive DEIB plan be shared with the public? And then she continues, will students, teachers, parents, and community members get to review and discuss these findings outside of a board meeting or CARE? If so, what is the plan to share these findings and the resulting action items to address suggested remedies? The next comment is from Kate Legge of Wynwood. I am greatly disheartened to hear that you are entertaining starting any school, but particularly one for adolescents, before 8 a.m. The board made a commitment that no school would start before 8, and because of that, many middle school parents were quiet about the impact of the changes. At the last meeting, without properly voting on the proposal on the table, you slipped in that middle school would start even earlier. They are adolescents. Please don't penalize these students with an early start time because they didn't know that was even possible for them to be sacrificed. The next comment is from Janice Lipsitz of Marion Station. I'd like to strongly recommend that we adopt a template that includes defining targeted measures for any investment or initiative we take on as a district. This would include both short-term measures such as number of teachers attending a target PD and longer-term measures such as increased sense of belonging via student survey. Thank you. The next comment is from Jill Altschuler of Marion Station. Thank you for both presentations. Regarding the equity study results, have the results been shared with staff and students? In order for students to feel it's worthwhile to fill out surveys, and if we want them to continue to complete surveys to provide important insight and information, informing them of results is important so they feel like their voices matter and affect change. Also, how are we measuring the impact of significant financial investment in DEI professional development? Are we measuring the impact of this investment? Next question, is there one person overseeing and coordinating professional development, or are there various people responsible, possibly contributing to consistency issues? Finally, on a different note, how is the school acknowledging Mental Health Awareness Month to publicize the work they might be doing to support all our kids on various levels, meeting them where they are? The next comment is from Michelle Vessel of Gladwin. I am a strong supporter of the implementation of Healthy Start Times in our school district. I would like to see Healthy Start Times implemented as soon as possible. I am disappointed to hear that the start time change has been pushed back to 2024, as I was hopeful that it would be implemented sooner. I am worried that it may be pushed back again, and I urge the school board to prioritize this issue and work toward implementing Healthy Start Times as soon as possible. I do not believe that middle school should start before 8 a.m., and I prefer that no additional time be taken from the high school day. If adjustments need to be made, please take from the elementary school day so that they can end at the desired time. I am also concerned that the school board is still not in agreement about the proposed model or changes recommended. Can we vote to actually implement the suggested model for March 20th and make modifications as we move forward? I would like to see action taken instead of continuing to discuss this issue without making any, and I think then the timer ended.
Any changes?
Any changes, maybe.
Thank you, Ms. Buckman. Thank you very much. We will move on with our agenda. We do have one recommended action this evening.
Yes, this evening, the recommended action item is that the acting superintendent recommends that the Board of School Directors approve the attached Human Resources Actions HR-1.
Are there any questions from the board? No. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. Upcoming meeting dates that are in person here in the District Administration Boardroom unless otherwise noted. This Wednesday, May 10th, is a Finance Committee meeting on the Capital Reserve. It is at 8:30 a.m. here. Thursday, May 11th, is a Facilities and Purchasing Committee meeting, again here at 8:30 a.m. Next Monday night at 8 p.m. is the regular business board meeting. And on May 31st is the Communications Committee meeting at 7 p.m. via Zoom. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.